right, we're continuing our study on parenting as we're quickly making our way through the workbook and adding some material to that. And today we're focusing on lesson 11 in the workbook, lesson 10 rather in the workbook, and lesson 12 in total. Toward the end, we'll finish the workbook and then go with 2 additional studies beyond the workbook. And that's our plan. All right, we give parenting rules at the beginning of each class. These are general rules that may apply to children that are babies. It may apply to children that are toddlers. It may apply more, in some cases, to children that are in their teen years. So we're trying to do a broad spectrum kind of listing of rules. Rule number 17 ought to be obvious, but this needs to be mentioned. Don't neglect your mate while focusing on your children. Don't neglect your mate while focusing on your children. If you do, when your children leave home, you'll not know the person to whom you're married. Would you agree with that? Why? Do you agree? Why would you follow the rule? Why do you agree with that? If that's a good rule, all right. Yeah, here you're neglecting perhaps, other than our relationship with the Lord, the most important relationship you have is being neglected. What happens in many homes in the rearing and the raising of children in light of this? You ever see homes where they're focused on their children, they're wrapped up in their children, and all that's well and good. They're spending time with their children. They're focused on their children's schooling, their well-being, their health, and taking care and nurturing of the children to the point the parents neglect each other. They don't take time for their relationship. And then the children leave home, and now they have an empty nest, and they look around and they don't even know each other. And I don't mean literally they don't know each other, but their bond is gone. Their relationship is gone. Their relationship has suffered. It's deteriorated. And now they're in a strained relationship. They're living in the same house with somebody that they don't even know that well anymore. Because they were not focusing on each other, they're focusing on their children. Does that make sense? So, good basic rule in rearing your children, don't ever neglect your mate while focusing on your children. So take time. As important as the relationship with your children and parenting is, take time with your mate and nurture that relationship. That may mean that grandparents need to see the children a night or two now and then. It may mean you have to hire a babysitter, and it's going to be worth the price to nurture that relationship. All right, let's get underway. Page 58. This has to do with lessons from the dinner table. And we're going to make the point later on, lest someone begin to think, is there some kind, and our author makes this point, and I'm going to develop it a little further than he does. There is no magic in the food that we have at the table or the table itself. That's not the point. That the dinner table is an occasion of getting the family together. And it's family togetherness is the focal point of this study. Does that make sense? And that's what this is about. So our author starts on this note here, that many families are so busy that few find time to spend time around the dinner table. That's true. He gives this quote. This quotation is taken from Suvan Butkus, who is a nutrition specialist at the Washington State University Research and Extension Center. And these statements, I would agree with it. There's so much competition for our time that finding time to cook and eat a meal with our kids gets squeezed out. We'll say more about that in a moment. She goes further to say that between work schedules and soccer and band practices for the kids, video games and internet, people increasingly don't schedule time for meals together. Do you find that to be true? Among people you know? Perhaps people that you know in the world, people you know that you work with, maybe even among some Christians. Is that true or is that overstated? It's true. Let's pursue that a little further before we go any Are we dealing with a minor problem and making a mountain out of a molehill, or is this a big problem in our society that she is describing? Absolutely true. Absolutely true. This is from the workbook. If you want these numbers and you don't remember them, this is one high school student took a survey among her peers and found that 22% never or rarely eat dinner with their family, 30% eat 1 or 3 nights a week with their family, 32% eat 4 to 6 nights a week with the family, and only 16% eat every night a meal with their family. When I first looked at that, it was the 16% that caught my attention, and I realized the 32% is the startling one for me. And that is that only 32%, a third, will eat anywhere from where most of their meals, that is the 4 to 6 nights a week with their family, that only a third of the high school students ate a dinner with their family most of the week. Now that's startling. That's disturbing, because of the problems that are created from that. So let's talk about problems created. What problems could be created from this lack? So let's just suppose that you in your family, and you have young children, and we're doing some pretending here, you've got young children, and you're going to raise your young children, and very little time are you going to spend at the dinner table together. And so you spend very little time. What kind of problems do you anticipate to be created? All right, you're going to have children grow up and you're not going to know who they are. You're not going to know why they're doing what they're doing. You don't know where they're going. You're not going to understand their philosophy because you've missed some good opportunities. Again, we have a quotation. These quotes are taken from page 58, first column, down toward the bottom. That this is also from one who is from the chair of the Nutrition Education Network, that there is solid research that shows that not sharing family meals can have a significant impact on kids. Well, how so? Well, there are a number of studies and surveys, Cindy points out, then they point in the same direction. When families don't get together regularly over dinner table, the kids are more prone to depression, drug use, don't eat as well, and don't do as well in school. Now, I'm not going to trace all those connections, but I think those studies, I think you could find more studies that compound that kind of evidence. And so here they're not doing well in school, their nutrition is not as well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All kinds of problems are created because they don't spend time together in the home around the dinner table. Now I want us to look at Psalm 128. So let's get our Bible out. Our author makes a passing reference to this. Or maybe I should say a reference. He does a little more than a passing reference. But Psalm 128, and here's the thing, let me back up a minute, and then we're going to look at Psalm 128. I want you to see the point that we're learning from the Psalm. The blessed family eats together. The blessed family eats together. Now this is from you've seen this slide before because we recently came through Psalms at the end of our survey. And so earlier this year, we were working our way through the latter part of the Psalms. And it's Psalm 128 now. This is the outline we went through of that Psalm. Only 6 verses here. We're not going to go through every detail. But I call this Psalm Prosperity of Those Who Fear God, a focus on the family. And so notice at verse 1. Verse 1, verse 4 through 6 talk about those who fear God are blessed. And so hopefully that's your goal. I want to raise a family that fears God, and hopefully you claim to be one who fears God. So let's start at verse 1. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. You're going to be blessed if you fear God. Drop down to verse 6. Behold, thus shall the man be who fears the Lord. You're going to be blessed if you fear God. And what is he going to do? Well, the Lord blesses, look at verse 5. You out of Zion, and may you see the good of Jerusalem all the days of your life. Yes, may you see your children's children. Peace be unto Israel. So what have we established so far? Well, the psalm is making the point, those who fear God are blessed. So if you fear God, your mate fears God, you're raising your children, you're hopefully going to have them to fear God, Psalm 34. So how are they blessed? Well, let's look. They're going to eat of the labor of their hands. That when you eat the labor of your hands, you will be happy and shall be well with you. And your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your house, and your children like olive plants all around your table. Now, we could analyze the psalm a little closer, but here's what I want you to see, that here's how those who fear God are blessed. And this is a general principle. It could be one is fearing God who lives a single life, and so they don't have the wife and the children and the grandchildren. One might fear God who has family disaster, and so they no longer have a wife or a husband or children, whatever the case may be. This is a general statement of those with a family if they fear God and raise their family to fear God. What happens? Well, they're going to eat of the labor of their hands, so there's the eating. And so things are going to go well with you. There's happiness. But notice at verse 3, your children will be gathered around the table. And so here's the principle that's set forth, that blessed people eat together with their family. Does that make sense? There's something about eating together, and we're going to see some significance of that from several other texts. All right, here's what we're going to see. Any questions on the introductory information before we get rolling here? All right, there's 6 points our author makes about what the dinner table does and what it says. And so let's start with the first point on page 58 now. If you're following in the workbook, if you don't have a workbook, you'll get the same points right here and perhaps a little more. All right, the dinner table says a great deal about a family. And here's the picture. You walk in, and here is a family that you don't know much about, and you walk in their home. And I'm not talking about on just one occasion, but you walk in their home on various occasions, and you take a look at what goes on in that kitchen or the dinner table or the kitchen table. That's going to tell you a whole lot about the family. How so? Well, is that dinner table mainly used as a storage area? That's where we store stuff. I've been in homes where stuff was stacked up, and this wasn't stuff from the grocery brought in that morning. This was like from months ago, maybe years ago, still stacked on the table, and it's obviously they don't use the table. And you go to another table, and it's stacked the same way. They obviously don't use that table except for storage. And sometimes it's a stack for food and for dishes. I'm not talking about a temporary thing. It's a place where we collect the mail and laundry and the coats and the books, etc. Or maybe it's a workbench. Or maybe it's a place for the family to eat together and to gather together. See my point? You can take a look at how that table is used and tell a whole lot about that family and about the importance of their relationship. What do they use this table for? What do they use this kitchen for? What do they use the dining room for? Wherever they normally eat or supposed to eat, what do they use that for? Make sense? All right. So the question is, what does your table say about you? I'm not talking about you just came in from the grocery and you got groceries piled up on the table and we walk in and you say, well, you caught me here with my groceries. That's not what we're talking about. What does your table, if we could see how it's used day to day, what would it say about you and your family relationship? Is it a place where you gather and where you eat and you have family to eat together? Or is it a place where you stack stuff and store stuff and you're not really interested in family being together? What does your table say about you? So it says a lot about a family. I'm more interested on page 58 now. Let's go to point number 2 at the bottom and flows over into 59. The dinner table is a place of cherished memories. Now, our author kind of goes in one direction, and I'm going to go there, but I'm going to take us in another direction as well that's not mentioned by our author. What I want you to see here is, let's start listing some things. In fact, we'll just list some things right here. That there are special occasions in the Bible that were associated with eating. Now, you say, well, wait a minute. Are you saying that there's some magic in the food and the eating itself? No. If you've read ahead, you know the author's not making that point, nor are we. Let's go to Genesis 18. Here's what I want you to see. In all of these occasions that are mentioned here, there was eating together. And that eating together either said something, we'll see more about that in Galatians 2, 1 Corinthians 5. Or that eating together was marking or had something to do with something special. Does that make sense? Case in point, Genesis 18. There were angels that came. There were 3 men that came, later identified, chapter 19, as angels, Hebrews 13. So that's why I call them angels. But be that as it may, as you start into Genesis 18, beginning at verse 1, the Lord appeared to him and, I want to drop down, let's see, where do I want to go? Verse 2, that he lifted up his eyes, this is Abram, that he lifted up his eyes and he looked and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and he bowed himself to the ground. So here were 3 visitors who came. They were angels. They came for a mission. And notice that what did Abraham do? He begged them, come stay with me, and let's eat and you be refreshed. Remember that? We're going to come back to that refreshing. And then he turned to Sarah, and what did he say to Sarah? Prepare a meal for them. And then he went and hastened, verse 7, to the herd and took a tender and young calf and gave it to a young man, and he returned to prepare it. And he took the butter and the calf and prepared before them, and they ate under the tree. So here were 3 angels that came. First, he doesn't know these are angels. He doesn't know what their mission is, but he entertains them. This is used later as an example of hospitality. But my point I want you to see is, here's a special occasion, and there was a meal connected with that. Does that make sense? All right, let's go to another one. Luke 15, the prodigal came back. Here was the wayward son came home, and he didn't just happen to come home, and it was dinner time, and oh, the dinner's on the table, come and join us. What'd the father say? Prepare a feast for him. Absolutely. So he tells his servants, go prepare a feast, and they take the fatted calf, and they kill the fatted calf, and they have a feast. So we're going to eat in celebration of his return. So here is eating associated with a special occasion. Does that make sense? Eating has, again, magic's not in the food. We're going to say more about that in a moment. All right, let's go to the 14th chapter. Verse 8. What do you see in Luke 14, verse 8? As often the case in our custom and in our society, so was in the first century custom and first century society, that when you have a wedding, you have a feast. There's a celebration. That's part of the eating. And so when you have a wedding and you invite guests to come to your wedding, it's not that you need to feed them because they're hungry and they wouldn't get to have. It's an occasion that part of the celebration is eating together. It's marking a special occasion. Does that make sense? All right, let's go further. Let's go to Psalm 128 again. The blessed family does what? And that's not by accident. We're going back to emphasize that. That's not just, we already mentioned that passage we shouldn't have. What was the point in Psalm 128? The blessed family eats together, and the blessed man who fears God has his children around his table. Make sense? All right. Now let's add some stuff that's not in, part of this is in our text and the workbook. But when one is unfaithful, you don't eat with them. 1 Corinthians 5 and verse 11. What's 1 Corinthians 5 about? Yeah, here's one who was disorderly. He's living ungodly. He is a fornicator, and the church was told to take action and put him away from among them. To borrow the language from 2 Thessalonians 3, they're to withdraw from him. But one of the requirements was you don't socialize, mix up together with, company, keep company, that's the idea of company, mix together with, not even to eat. Eating is only one portion of that. So here's the point. When one become unfaithful, you don't eat with them. Why? All right. You can't partake in what they're doing. Come back to that. That's a good point. What'd you say? All right. Good point. Do you notice in all of these examples so far that the eating together has something to do with a relationship we have with people? Either trying to establish a relationship with these 3 men, Genesis 18, or relationship with your guest, or relationship that's restored of the son, here is an indication this relationship is broken. Does that make sense? Now let's go to Galatians 2. We don't talk about Galatians 2 much and with reference to eating. Peter would not eat with the Gentiles. He had eaten with them before and knew it was right to eat with Gentiles and had defended the principle of eating with Gentiles. But on this occasion, he acted as a hypocrite and he wouldn't eat with them. Now, what did that indicate? I don't want to eat with them because of these Jews who've come in. What's he trying to say to these Jews? Finish my sentence. He's saying to these Jews by his action, I do not have a relationship with the Gentiles. Make sense? All right. So what I'm learning from Galatians 2 is that it implies a close relationship. Yes, sir.
1 Corinthians 5, when it says not even to eat with them, I believe that word even is there to say that eating with a person is one of the most foundational parts of the relationship.
Yes. Yes, not even to eat, because that is a fundamental part of a relationship. And you see that if you have a close friend, I can't imagine you saying, this is my best friend. We've been best friends for 10 years. Well, where do y'all like to go eat? We don't ever eat together. This is your best friend. You don't ever eat together. They've never been in your home. You've never been in their home. You don't go out. It's kind of a strange relationship, isn't it? That if this is, that is a fundamental principle of relationships, you eat together. And so if you have a relationship with your children, there ought to be some eating together. Make sense?
In the verse 13, Donnie, also makes a very potential word there that we should understand. That you're to put that evil person away from you. This person is evil.
Yeah.
Once they turn their back on the Lord. And you're not to be in a special relationship with that person anymore because they are evil.
Good point. Good point. This shows that eating together is a part of a cherished relationship. That's what we're after here. That eating together is a part of a cherished relationship. Does that make sense? So we can show from Scripture that eating together is part of a cherished relationship. Now, what I can't imagine, let me exaggerate for emphasis. This is my best friend over here. I don't ever eat with them. Here is someone that I can't hardly stand and that I think lives evil and I don't approve of their life, but I eat with them all the time. That doesn't make sense. And I'm not even talking in the context of withdrawing or not withdrawing. That's another issue. I'm just talking about maybe it's friends that I'm supposed to have and of the world, and I eat all the time with, I don't eat with this one that's my best friend, but this one over here that I can't stand, I eat all the time. That doesn't make sense. It has to do with a special relationship. All right. With that in mind, let's go a little bit further. What memories will I want to shift gears on the memory part. Cherished memories. What memories will your children have about your dinner table? So if you still have young children and you raise your children, and let's fast forward now, and they're grown and they have children of their own, and they sit around their tables telling their children what they remember about being at your table. What are they going to tell? They're going to tell, I remember the stories that we used to be told. And that's where we caught up on some family history, and we heard about grandpa and grandma and great-grandparents, etc. We heard about family history. We heard Bible stories at the table. Do they remember laughter? Do they remember learning about family? Do they remember mom serving their favorite meals and showed her love for the children? That you tried to fix a favorite meal for each one occasionally. Do they remember meal times as being enjoyable? That was so fun. That was so enjoyable to go to the dinner table. Or are they going to remember the dinner table was always a time of misery? There was always tension. There was always flares of anger. It was always a miserable time to come to the table. Couldn't wait to get up and leave the table. Does that make sense? What memories will your child have? Family that doesn't eat together often, what does that say about their relationship? And so if your child grows up and says, you know what, I don't ever remember coming to the dinner table on a regular basis. We did, okay, but very seldom did we ever come to the dinner table as a family. What does that say about your relationship? Challenging thought, isn't it? All right, let's shift gears. Let's go to page 59 now. Let's talk about the third thing. The dinner table brings the family together. Now, some families are in this destructive cycle. Our author mentions this on page 59, the bottom of page 59. And that is the wife never cooks supper or seldom cooks supper because the husband is always late coming home. And then the husband says, I don't go home for supper all the time because she hardly ever cooks. And so this is an endless cycle going round and round. Or parents don't worry if their children come home by dinner time. Stay with your friends, whatever. You don't have to be home by dinner time. Or children have nothing to look forward to in the evening. They get out of school and they have nothing to look forward to except going to bed, getting their homework, and rising the next morning to do it again. That's an endless, vicious cycle. Now, I want to make this point, and our author makes this point, but I want to expand on this because I think this is important. The magic is not in the food. Would you agree with that? The magic is not in the food. The meal is what brings the family together. It is a created occasion. And that's what brings the family together. Maybe not the best illustration, but our author makes the point. He has cows, and that's what brings them together is when you feed them. I don't know much about cows. I do know about horses. And I hear people complain about the horses. I can't get my horses up. You can get them up if you feed them. Guarantee you can. You feed them regularly, and they know what time to eat, they'll always be at the barn. They'll always come together when you feed them. Now, that's not parallel in all respects, but you feed your family, and they'll come together. They'll come together. It's the communication that happens during the meal that becomes the magic. There's where the magic is, if we want to use that term. There is no magic. But do you see my point? See the author's point? Now, the same principle is when you have guests over for a meal. It's not the food, it's the visit. So you invite your friends over for a meal, and you're going to cook hamburgers. Is there magic in the hamburgers is what makes this a great relationship? It doesn't matter if it's hamburger, bologna sandwich, or peanut butter and jelly. It's the fact you got together, and it's the communication you have over that meal. Does that make sense? That's why we don't need to fret a whole lot about what we're serving. Just, it's the time we spend together. Make sense? That's where we bond, and that's where we form relationships, and those relationships are strengthened. Whether it's with our friends, or whether it's with our mates, or with our children, or with our parents. Make sense? Family time together is important. That continues to apply as your children get older. It's not just when they're young, but as they get older, that's also where you keep those bonds going and those relationships going. Much family things can be discussed around a dinner table together. Make sense? All right. Now, if you do things together as a family, or doing things together as a family, should include eating meals together. We need to do things together as a family. Continue to do things together as a family, and that includes eating meals together. Families that eat together are going to be stronger as a rule. All right, now let's talk about what we accomplish during this time when we come together as a meal. So I know just looking at the table says a lot about the family. It's a place of cherished memories. We got that. We got the family together. And it's a place where we can have communication. What are we going to communicate? Well, that's very important. It provides a time to weed. What do we mean by weeding? Absolutely. Good point. Good point. You see, this is a time when you're sitting together around the dinner table, that if you do this on a daily basis, as you sit around the dinner table, there are things that need to be planted and cultivated, just like a garden. It's like raising a garden. If you're going to have a garden, you got to plant something, and then you got to water it. And you may have to fertilize it a little bit to see it grow. There may be a time that you can plant some ideas in your children. And you may have to come back and kind of cultivate that, see if it's going to grow. You may have to water it a little bit. You may have to fertilize that a little bit. You may have to coach that along. But it's also a time when weeds need to be removed. Satan is going to be sowing snares in your spiritual garden. You've got a garden sitting around your table, and Satan is sowing tares in the midst of your garden. And what's going to happen with those tares is it's going to rise up and choke out the influence of good in your children. And so what responsibility do I have as a parent? I got to pull those weeds out. So it's at that table where you're going to learn what a child's going through and the struggles they face. That's where you're going to ask what's going on at school, what's going on with their friends. That's where you may have an occasion to find out what's bothering them, etc. Make sense? So it gives you a chance to do some weeding out of some things. You begin to learn this influence of their friend they've got, and you may need to start pulling that weed pretty strong because they may be choking out the spirituality of your child. Gives you a chance to help your child fight against Satan. That this is a tear that's been sown, and I need to help you pull that weed, and we're going to get that weed out. Does that make sense? Great opportunity. That can be done around the dinner table. That's not the only place we do that, but it gives us a chance to weed. Questions or comments on that before we go further?
Donnie, you went to Galatians 5, following on down into verse 13, it talks about Barnabas being influenced by Peter. And so right there during that time, you have exactly what you're talking about here. And Paul stood up and corrected Peter. He didn't have to correct Barnabas. It's not mentioned that he corrected Barnabas. So sometimes with your kids, when you're together like that, you can work through something with one of them and be an influence on the others.
Absolutely, yeah. Barnabas had to be influenced by seeing that severe rebuke on Peter. Had to be. In fact, in Acts chapter 5, when Ananias and Sapphira died, the rest of the church feared. Verse 11, remember that? Well, I would too. And so here's this child that's got a real problem. The siblings will take hold of that when they see their older sibling got punished severely for that. They may take heed to that. All right, this is also a time that we might do some teaching. Page 59, if you're following in the workbook. It's a time to do some teaching, second column. Now let's list a number of things here. Let's go to Deuteronomy 6. This is a time when you might make application of a lesson that's been learned in a sermon, or maybe in a class, or maybe a Bible lesson that you've had in your home, etc. Deuteronomy 6, we quote this many times. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk with them when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. I'm interested in when you walk by the way. I take that to mean you're going to take these principles of truth and you're going to press them into the heart of your children, which is the idea there of diligently, as a sharp, whetted instrument. You press them into your children, and then you talk of them when you walk by the way. In other words, I take that to mean application. Here's the principle that we've talked about. Here's the principle we learned. Here's the sermon we heard. Here's the class we had. And so at the dinner table might be a good occasion to say, what you dealt with today at school is where we make application of that Bible principle. What you're going through is where we use this principle that we studied in Bible class the other day. Here is an occasion where we're going to make use of this. Make sense? The dinner table is a good place to make application of something we've already learned. It may not be the time you're going to open up your Bible and exegete the text and show the Hebrew and show the Greek and show parallel accounts. You're not going to do that with a fork in your hand, but you can make some application. Make sense? All right. Here's something else we can do. It's a good time, our author mentions this, to teach little boys about becoming godly men. How can they learn that at the dinner table? Particularly in light of 1 Peter 3:7. Finish my sentence. The little boy sitting here is going to learn from his daddy about how he should treat his mother by watching what his father does at the table, like complimenting mom's meal, not complaining when it wasn't exactly what he wanted. What else? Yeah, he learns how to treat his wife. He's learning how to be a godly man, that he's going to deal with her. He's going to learn how to deal with his own wife and with understanding. and treating her as an equal together of the grace of life. Make sense? He may learn that right there at the table. Right there at the table. Absolutely. This is the kind of treatment that you want. This is the kind of man that you're looking for. He can teach that to his daughters. Absolutely. It's a good time to teach the little girls about becoming godly women, about being keepers at home, about loving their husbands and loving their children. It's a good time to set some examples here at the table, to talk about some things at the table. It's going to be an occasion to teach about the importance of prayer. Often that's where children learn about prayer to start with, is prayer that's offered around the food. And so is that the only place they should learn? No, absolutely not. But that may be where they're learning about prayer. It might be an occasion where, as we sit down to say the thanks for the meal, that we might want to mention, we're going to pray for brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so who's struggling, or we're going to pray for so-and-so who's got health issues. And the children learn that you pray for people by listening to the prayers at the table. Might be a good occasion, good teachable moment. And it's a good tool for teaching hospitality. You can use your dinner table to teach people hospitality, teach your children hospitality. Have some guests in, and your children just learn that we share our blessings with others. And they will be the ones to benefit from that. I wouldn't take anything for the memories of sitting around the table with people that my mom cooked for. Some of them were preachers who came and stayed with us. And the memories of sitting around that table are just a blessing. And you perhaps have many of those same memories as well. All right, the time is running short, so let's go quickly to number 6, page 60. A little short section here. The dinner table is a time for refreshment, and we just simply want to make the point, as our author does here, that a good meal at the end of the day can be refreshing. And we cite Genesis 18:5. Remember what Abraham said? He asked them to come in that they may be refreshed. Remember that? Verse 5. Solomon said it's good to eat and drink and enjoy the good of one's labor. That's almost a direct quotation from chapter 2 and verse 24, and I believe it's 3 and 12. Almost the same thing. Those are a little different wording, but nearly the same wording. And so it's good to enjoy that. So it's a refreshing to do that. And so it may be a time that will help you and your children deal with the struggles of life. Just a refreshing moment to sit down with family that you love and appreciate and have a good meal is a time that's quite contrasted to the struggles and the stress of life. Questions or comments?
All these things came into the world. I can remember when we had no TV. No, I'm older than most people.
Amen. Yeah.
Good, but always take the stress and carry you away from the family.
Absolutely. And so the struggle is, we do live in a time where there's television and there's electronics, computers and internet, et cetera. Phones. What was it you said one day? Put the phone down? Put the phone down. Say it again. Yeah. That's a good time. At the dinner table is a good time to put the phone down. Maybe that's a good note to stop on. Put your phone down and gather at the dinner table. We'll stop right there.